Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty heavy, but absolutely crucial. We're talking about a claustrophobic reality, hidden emotional pain, and how we can actually find a path toward transparency and healing. You know, when we think about depression, we usually picture someone struggling to just get out of bed, right? Or maybe openly weeping. But what if the most dangerous form of depression looks exactly like, well, a completely perfect life?
To really understand this, let's look at a woman named Natalie. When Natalie first walked into her therapist's office, she was actually kind of apologetic. She even giggled a bit as she described what was going on. A racing heart, having trouble breathing, this sudden, overwhelming urge to just bolt from the room when she felt pressured. She literally told her therapist, "My life's almost perfect. I just need to calm down." And honestly, looking at her from the outside, it seemed totally true. She was super successful, had a great marriage, tons of friends, and she deeply loved her kids. Any trained professional will look at this and say, okay, textbook common anxiety disorder.
But that entire facade shattered just a short time later. One afternoon, her therapist gets this incredibly worried call from Natalie's husband. He'd gotten a really strange message from her, and his gut was just screaming that something was wrong. The therapist drove to their house, let herself in, and walked into this perfectly silent kitchen. I mean, the dishes were freshly washed, the towels were neatly folded right by the sink. But upstairs, the scene was absolutely chilling. Natalie was lying unconscious in bed. There was an empty vodka bottle and a few stray pills just lying on the table. It was a suicide attempt. Her therapist had absolutely no clue Natalie was suicidal. None. Zero. And that leaves us with this really haunting question that we're going to unpack today. What on earth was missed? Okay, let's move into section 1, the clinical reality, what we usually look for. To figure out how Natalie's immense pain just totally slipped under the radar, we first have to understand how medical professionals are actually trained to look at mental health. So there's a really stark contrast between just feeling down and having clinical depression. I mean, we all feel sad sometimes, right? Getting a bad grade on a test, losing a job, having a nasty fight with a friend, or honestly, even just a gloomy, rainy day can trigger a temporary bout of sadness. But clinical depression is a whole different ballgame. It's a medical disorder. It won't just magically disappear just because you really want it to. It lingers for at least 2 consecutive weeks, and it significantly messes with your fundamental ability to work, to play, or to love. So how do doctors actually spot it? Well, they rely on something called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM-5. Basically, for a clinical diagnosis of depression, a doctor is looking to see if a patient checks off at least 5 of 9 very specific symptoms, and they have to have them for a couple of weeks. They're scanning for things like a persistently low mood, a total loss of interest or pleasure in stuff the person usually loves, disturbed sleep, changes in appetite, severe fatigue, slowed movements, really poor concentration, excessive guilt, or suicidal thoughts. This right here is the internationally recognized go-to checklist. And look, that checklist exists for a really good reason. Clinical depression isn't just some behavioral quirk or character flaw. No way. It has tangible, physical manifestations right inside the brain. Thanks to neuroimaging, we can literally see the biological evidence. We're talking smaller frontal lobes and reduced hippocampal volumes. On a microscopic level, there's a real depletion of crucial neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. We see blunted circadian rhythms, completely altered sleep cycles, and even severe hormone abnormalities, like incredibly high cortisol levels. The big takeaway here, depression is a physical medical condition. Just like asthma or diabetes physically impacts the body, depression physically alters the brain. Which brings us to section 2, the diagnostic blind spot, when the lens misses the pain. Because relying strictly on this rigid medical model, it creates a really dangerous gap. Like, what actually happens when someone covers up their struggles with a big, bright smile? It really makes you wonder, what if the very lens you're using is the reason you're missing the problem? The DSM criteria, it acts as a lens for these professionals. When Natalie went to therapy, her doctor did exactly what they were trained to do. They asked all the standard questions based on that diagnostic lens. Sleep or appetite disturbances? Nope. Lost pleasure in hobbies? Nope. Any suicidal thinking? She completely denied it, insisting her life was just way too full of things to be grateful for. The thing is, if a clinician's lens is only dialed in to look for those traditional symptoms, it is going to completely miss a patient whose intense fear of being vulnerable keeps them acting like everything is 100% fine. It's a really ironic tragedy. A flawless, perfect-seeming life is actually the ultimate camouflage for deep, deep pain. So while those classic severe symptoms might be totally hidden, high-functioning depression still leaks out, just in much more subtle ways. For instance, someone hiding immense pain might just seem easily irritated by really small things. They might slowly, quietly lose interest in their former activities, or just lack energy for most of the day. They might hide the fact that they're undersleeping or oversleeping, or subtly start isolating themselves from their friends and family. In cases of perfectly hidden depression, this rigid emotional control and intense perfectionism acts like a cage. The person is absolutely terrified of being found out, so they cover up these subtle signs with even more forced perfection. It's exhausting just thinking about it. And this brings us to a really critical concept developed back in 1993 by Edwin Schneidman. He was a renowned researcher in suicidology, and he coined this term, psychache. He defined it as an absolutely intolerable emotional and psychological pain. Now, his research was a massive game changer. It basically upended the common psychiatric thinking of the time because he discovered that this profound psychache, and not necessarily a neat little clinical depression diagnosis from a DSM checklist, is what actually sits at the very core of suicide. To effectively treat suicide risk, you have to acknowledge and work through this immense hidden pain rather than just slapping a checklist diagnosis on someone.
Let's step into Section 3, Unmasking the Hidden Pain, the story of Michael. This is going to take us out of that dark, rigid clinical space and into the much warmer, very human reality of a guy named Michael. Let's look at how he finally dropped his mask.
So Michael was this internationally prominent figure in his field. Honestly, he was the kind of guy who actually laughed at the idea of therapy, saying nobody would ever imagine him sitting on a shrink's couch. But let's look at his journey. As a kid, he endured some horrific abuse and had a really tumultuous relationship with his dad. When his father died suddenly, Michael just couldn't forgive himself for never saying "I love you." As an adult, his strategy was basically to cover all those painful secrets by achieving more and more professionally. He really thought success would just blot out the pain. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But eventually, in therapy, he finally revealed his hidden intent to die. And through doing that heavy work, he realized his feelings weren't a weakness. He learned how to have self-compassion without lugging around this shame that honestly wasn't even his to carry. And his big breakthrough is kind of beautiful. One day, he's sitting on a totally crowded airplane journaling about his childhood. A tear rolled down his cheek right out in public. And for the first time in his entire life, he just didn't care who saw. He finally let the mask drop. Moving into Section 4, Transparency as True Strength. Changing the culture of silence. You see, Michael's journey illuminates this incredible path forward for all of us. It's a shift away from hiding behind a rigid shield of silence and moving toward a culture that just glows with acceptance. There's this incredibly powerful realization that we all need to embrace, and it's this. So many suicidal feelings are natural, human, normal responses to what has happened in your life. Okay, let's pause here for a second. This is not saying suicide itself is normal, but rather that having thoughts about it is so much more common than we like to admit. I mean, when someone is carrying completely intolerable pain, of course their mind is going to look for an escape hatch. We absolutely have to radically destigmatize these dark thoughts. You know, when someone actually shares them, our knee-jerk reaction is usually to say something like, "How could you be so selfish? You have a great life." But guys, that is literally the quickest way to permanently end a conversation. Instead, we have to meet them not with shock, not with judgment, but with profound, genuine empathy. And that leads to a really massive shift in perspective. Transparency is not weakness. Actually, scratch that. Transparency is healthy self-acceptance. It's a profound personal strength. For way too long, society has demanded these perfect exteriors. We've essentially forced people to completely deny the existence of their own despair and loneliness just so they can appear fine to everyone else. But when we finally stop demanding perfection and we start having real, open, empathetic conversations about mental illness, we start eroding that dangerous stigma. In fact, research clearly shows that openly asking someone about suicidal thoughts actually reduces the risk. By embracing transparency as a strength, we literally save lives. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, really important question to chew on. How are you going to respond when someone reveals their perfectly hidden pain to you? Are you going to react with disbelief just because their life looks so shiny and perfect on the outside? Or is your diagnostic lens ready to meet their hidden truth with the warmth, acceptance, and compassion they so desperately need? The choice is entirely yours, and honestly, it makes all the difference in the world.